The North Korea dilemma is getting even more complicated for President Trump. Now it looks like both Russia and China have been secretly shipping oil to North Korea in violation of the United Nations sanctions. We told you last night how a U.S. spy satellite photos apparently show Chinese ships transferring oil to North Korean ships at sea. Now, two senior European security sources tell Reuters that the Russians have been doing the same thing. Let's discuss what this means with Fox News contributor and political science professor Kiron Skinner in San Francisco. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. This is a very difficult situation. I mean, on one hand, you had a very impressive vote in the United Nations, only now to have evidence that both Russia and China are violating these same sanctions. What would you recommend to the president?
What's actually happening here is that global leadership is being devolved to the United States, and because the Russians and Chinese are not living up to United Nations Security Council resolutions, especially the one in September, they're violating international law and international norms. And I would suggest that the President of the United States make it absolutely clear that if the governments in Russia and China do not penalize and stop those shipping companies that are trading oil with the North Koreans, that the United States has to begin to look at military options, and that underscore the fact that the United States is actually going to become the leader of resolving the North Korean conflict within Northeast Asia and beyond. And that's not something I think the Russians and the Chinese want to happen.
Now, to add the clarity that you're seeking, a military option against China and Russia is probably not viable, but they can do some things, for instance, such as a naval blockade. Is that what you mean by saying taking action and military action?
I'm not really suggesting military action because I know that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense do not want to go down that path. They've been working overtime on the diplomatic front, but we have to let our strategic adversaries in the North Korea issue understand that the full range of options have to be on the table. We will continue to use diplomacy aggressively, but they have to know that if they make North Korea much more of an unstable regime by propping it up, it serves no good interest for them as well. I don't think they quite understand it yet.
Now, the president has tried to channel Ronald Reagan in his whole peace through strength approach. Is the United Nations as worthless as it seems from at least my vantage point?
I wouldn't say it's worthless. It is a huge debating society where often in the General Assembly, the United States is the target. But the fact that we got unanimous votes in the United Nations suggests that the international community is moving in the direction of what the United States has been saying all along, especially under President Trump, that North Korea has to be a denuclearized country because it is so particularly dangerous. It could be the site of nuclear proliferation throughout Northeast Asia, indeed the Indo-Pacific region. And so I think what it can do for the United States now, under the America First policy of the president, is help reinforce the issues that America First and principled realism, a pillar of the president's policy, suggests is that sovereignty matters, that respecting international norms and laws, they matter as well. And so in that way, the UN does play a useful role.
My own personal take on this is that more sanctions isn't going to work because the leader of North Korea really doesn't care about his people. But last question for you real quick. The idea of a naval blockade to prohibit the importation of things that are needed and critical in North Korea, do you believe that is one of the viable things sitting on the president's desk?
I think it's being debated in the Pentagon and in the national security community. Whether it's on the president's desk, I don't know. But let me just speak to your pessimism on UN Security Council resolutions. They do work when there is compliance. And if given the strict nature of the most recent December resolution against North Korea in the Security Council, if indeed it's implemented fully, it has a punishing impact on the North Korean economy. The Russians and Chinese, if they don't comply, they are undermining something that could really bring North Korea to the negotiating table.
Well, and I hope that President Trump continues to show the world how the Russians and the Chinese evidently are not complying with something that they were supportive of not too long ago. Professor, we wish you the happiest of holidays and a happy new year. And thank you again for joining us.